Hello, what's up, guys? Conquering the enemies of flow. Training yourself to achieve flow regularly and even multiple sessions in the same day will have you performing like a superhero. But we all know that superheroes are constantly challenged by supervillains, and a number of them are lurking around every corner, stalking your flow and trying to extinguish it. Here are here are the four supervillains you need to keep at bay if your flow is going to thrive. One, multitasking. We've talked about this before, even in this chapter, but it bears repeating. Being a master multitasker is not synonymous with being limitless. In fact, research repeatedly shows that people who multitask are considerably less productive than those who focus on one task at a time. Given what you know about flow, it should be obvious that multitasking is the mortal enemy of this feeling. You're never gonna get into the flow state to craft that epic solo or create that jaw-dropping presentation if you're also checking in with colleagues, sending off a quick note to a friend, and reading your company email. The only way to vanquish the supervillain multitask is to ignore him completely, clear your schedule of everything else, and get in the flow. 2. Stress. This is a particular deadly supervillain and one that sometimes requires a monumental battle to defeat. If you have lots of outside stressors in your life, deadlines, relationships issues, family problems, worries about your job security, etc., they're likely to sneak up on you at even any given moment. I'm sure you've had the experience of thinking about something entirely different when you're suddenly ambushed by an anxious reminder that you're facing some troubles at home. Once that thought is in your head, any opportunities for flow are crushed. Defeating the supervillain requires two expert moves. The first is to look at the supervillain in the eyes before you start and ask yourself if there's anything that you absolutely must deal with before you can get in the flow. If the answer is yes, address that first. But in all likelihood, the answer will be no. It isn't that the stresses aren't real, but they often don't need your immediate attention, and they aren't gonna be worse 2 hours from now. If that's the case, contend with the supervillain by putting up your force field. Make your space impenetrable by outside stresses so you can concentrate completely on the task at hand. 3. Fear of failure. Perfectionism reduces creativity and innovation, writes Hera Estroff, Marano editor-at-large and the former editor-in-chief of Psychology Today. It is a steady source of negative emotions. Rather than reaching towards something positive, those in its grip are focused on the very thing they most wanted to avoid: negative evaluation. Perfectionism then is an endless report card. It keeps people completely self-absorbed, engaged in perpetual self-evaluation, reaping relentless frustration and doomed to anxiety and depression. If you go into a task with the belief that you absolutely must perform this task perfectly and that failure will be devastating, you're gonna be so focused on not failing that you'll never get into a state where you can truly excel. Remember earlier when we talked about how one of the ideal conditions for flow is pushing yourself just a little outside of your comfort zone. When you do this, you increase the odds that you're not going to get everything right the first time. If you allow the supervillain of perfectionism to master you at this point, your flow will be forfeited. To best this villain, you need to convince yourself that lack of perfectionism is not only okay, but is a clear sign that you're pushing yourself in ways that you must. For lack of conviction, nearly as devilish a supervillain as perfectionism is a lack of belief in what you're doing. The brain perceives uncertainty as a threat, which sparks the release of cortisol, a stress hormone that disrupts memory, depresses the immune system, and increases the risk of high blood pressure and depression, writes Travis Bradbury, president of TaleSmart. If you don't believe you're going to accomplish anything of importance, you'll guarantee that will be the outcome. If you go into a test doubting your ability to complete it, ask yourself this question: do I have the necessary skill to do this? Do I have all the information I need to do this? Do I have enough passion for the project to do this? If the answer to any of this is no, set the task aside until you can answer each of these questions in the affirmative. But if the answer to all three of these questions is yes, take the supervillain down and get into the flow. Before we move on, the flow experience is one of the greatest highs any of us will ever experience. It is also fundamental to becoming limitless. By this point, you should have a better sense of what flow is and how to get there. Before we move on, take a little time to try out the following. Reflect on a few times you've been in the flow, what you were doing, what was consistent about those experiences, how can you get back there more often. Take out your calendar and find a spot in the next few days where you can carve out 90 minutes to 2 hours. This needs to be a time when you can free yourself of all distraction. Now what are you going to do with that time to dramatically boost your productivity? How often do you go into a project with one of the supervillains we talk about in this chapter stalking you? What can you do right now to defeat that supervillain before going into your next project? Quote: the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. Evan Toffler. Part 4. Limitless methods. The how. Tomorrow. Mindset, possibility, inspiration, ideation, motivation, purpose, inspiration, implementation, methods, process, implementation, ideation. With these three combined, limitless. Method, a specific process for accomplishing something, especially an orderly, logical, or systematic way of instruction. By this point, you've discovered how to unleash two of the elements necessary to become limitless. You've learned how to approach every day with a productive mindset, and you've learned how to do so with an optimal level of motivation. But there's one more M that differentiates limitless people from those who are encumbered by their limitations. Methods are the procedures or processes for accomplishing something. In this context, method is the process of learning how to learn, also called meta learning. When we go through the education system, we are taught very antiquated and inefficient ways of learning, such as sub-vocalization and rote memorization. As I mentioned at the start of this book, when I was struggling as the boy with a broken brain, I wasn't incapable of learning. History has shown that, but I wasn't succeeding at learning in the way I was being taught. It wasn't until I mastered a new way of learning, a method you'll see over the course of the coming chapters, that I could finally use my brain to excel. In this section, you're gonna learn the science of accelerated learning and meta learning in 5 areas: focus, study, memory, speed reading, and thinking. These are the 5 flagship programs that we teach to individuals and organizations at Quick Learning. Take special note of the lead-in questions at the start of these chapters, and make sure to try out all these exercises I've included. Once you start using these tools, I think you'll find yourself using them all the time, and I think you'll be amazed at what they unlock for you. Okay. Quote: whenever you want to achieve something, keep your eyes open, concentrate, and make sure you know exactly what it is you want. No one can hit their target with their eyes closed. Paulo Coelho. Tomorrow, 11. Focus. Okay, so that's it, guys. That's it for today. Bye.